All right, so this is the first presentation from Unit 2. So Unit 2 again is over human geography. We start off with culture and just looking at general what culture is and stuff like that. And so again, just a reminder, we're taking all the information from Unit 1 and then all that we're going to learn in Unit 2, and then we're going to apply that information throughout the world as we go region by region. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on this. All right, so culture. First off, just the basic definition of culture is that it's a way of life of a group of people. They share similar beliefs and customs. And so you can define culture, for a country, how a whole group in a country act. And you can whittle that all the way down to the culture of your family. Like your family has a unique way of doing things compared to other families. And so culture can be defined in many different ways and can be applied to many different groups. But thinking big, when we look at the change in cultures, you need to know the three things that change culture. So the first one is contact. If you have contact with other cultures, it's going to affect your own culture. Food may change, though. The things you believe, the way you view certain things, that's going to be affected by coming in contact with another culture. That could be living close to another culture, like with Texas, we're close to Mexico, so you see Tex-Mex, you see Spanglish. So it affects the language as well. But this also happens to if you travel, go to other countries, you're going to experience another culture, and that's going to change you. It's going to impact you in a different way. And then barriers are things that separate cultures. And so the Sahara Desert's a great example in Africa, where in far northern Africa, you have mainly an Arabic population, majority Muslim. And then we go south of the Sahara, and the sub-Saharan region is what we call it in Africa. That region is not Arabic mainly, it's majority Christian. And so those cultures have not interacted as much because of that giant barrier in the way. And of course, this could be oceans as well, like the Atlantic Ocean separating us from Europe. And then far-reaching changes are big changes that happen in a culture. So like in our culture, the biggest change that's happened is the Renaissance, which started in Italy. And that's really what catapulted Western civilization to where it is today and why we are at the forefront of advancement when it comes to really just kind of, in a sense, not just kind of a bad way to put it, but controlling the world in the sense of having the strongest economies, being the most innovative at this particular point in history. And so the Renaissance is this big change to really, we started learning how to read and write again. You see the arts all of a sudden come out of nowhere. So Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Donatello, all the Ninja Turtles really were popular at this time. And so, but all these changes, of course, had a huge effect on our culture and still do today. All right, then cultural traits. Those are things like just certain behaviors we have. And a lot of these things you probably don't even think about, like how you stand in an elevator or little things about like, expectations on when you show up to a party, time management, punctuality, how we dress, how we greet each other, things like that. That's all the cultural traits, kind of like when you're walking on the hallway and you see somebody like, hey, what's up? Or like, how you doing? Like, you're not really asking how they're doing. You probably don't even really care. You're just saying that because that's what we do when we pass each other. And of course you answer, yeah, everything's good, even if it's not. So those are cultural traits. And then the important features of a culture that we'll hit here in a second are social groups, language, and religion. All right, so groups. There's a lot of key terms with this. So society. A society is a group of people that shares a region, a sense of identity, and culture. So when we talk about the American society, we're talking about a group of people. We share a region. We live in the same area. We have a sense of identity of who we are and a similar culture that we share. So that's a society. An ethnic group is a group that shares language, customs, and a common heritage. So this could be like the Native Americans. This could obviously be like the French and the Germans and things like that. So they all share common language, heritage, and things of that sort. So ethnicity is not the same as race. All right, then more social groups. So the family is the most important social group in any culture. That is the foundation of the culture. If you have a strong family unit within society, then you're going to have a strong culture. When you start seeing families break down within society, then that breaks down the culture as a whole. And so, of course, you can look at this country and how we have a high divorce rate and stuff like that. That is going to affect the overall culture and how we operate. Now, the more key terms, nuclear family, that is your mom and dad and siblings. And so that's the core family unit. So in our culture, for example, generally that's the most important part of your family is your nuclear family. Whereas an extended family, which is your crazy uncle and all your weird cousins and stuff like that, your second cousins, your third cousins, all those, that's your extended family. In our culture, generally speaking, extended family is not as close. Now you go to other places and other cultures, especially like Latin cultures, extended families, everybody, they're super close and live in close proximity to one another. So that's, varies based on culture. And then matriarchy and patriarchy. So matriarchy is where the woman is in charge of the family, maybe the oldest woman in the family that controls it. And then patriarchy is where it's the oldest man that's in charge. Now, patriarchies are more common throughout the world and throughout history. But there have been matriarchies. We've seen more of these in India, in certain regions of India, where you'll see a matriarchy in place. All right, more key terms for culture. Innovation, we'll be using this term a lot throughout the year. And innovation is taking something that already exists and making it better. So it's not inventing something totally new. It's just improving on existing technology. So like the photos down here at the bottom on this slide, it's the idea of communication. Well, communication's improved over time. From stuff being written on, pots and jars and stuff like that in ancient Greece, and putting paintings on there that, reflect your culture. Then move way fast forward to the Pony Express, and then quickly to the telegraph, and then to the telephone, and then for the past 100 years, just improving the telephone, basically. And then, of course, the rise of the internet. So all that is innovation. So cultures that do the best are the most innovative. So like our culture, for example, Americans are very innovative. We improve on technologies a lot and very quickly at this point. So throughout history, innovation usually was kind of a slow process. But now over the past 100 years, we've expedited that process quite a bit. We improve things very quickly. And then a cultural hearth. So this is a site of innovation where basic ideas and materials basically diffuse from. Now that's confusing. So basically all this is saying, another way of putting it is it's a cradle of civilization. So it's where something is born. So think about where something started. So like drama, for example, the way we have drama and comedy and basically movies and stories like we have today, that was basically born in Greece. The Greeks are the ones that really brought that to life and made it part of Western culture. So the cultural hearth for drama and comedy would be Greece. And so everything has a certain point on earth, a certain culture where it originated from. So that is the cradle of civilization. A cultural hearth is just the birthplace of an idea. And then from that, it begins to diffuse to different parts of the world. Next word, diffusion, begins to diffuse to different parts of the world. And as it diffuses, you're going to see innovation. Different cultures are going to take that and then innovate. They're going to make it better and improve upon it and stuff like that. And so the basic idea where it starts is the hearth. Diffusion is it spreading from the hearth. And then innovation is what happens as it spreads and different cultures apply their ideas and make it better over time. And then acculturation, again with the same ideas, where society decides to adopt that. So as this idea is spreading, it's going to hit other cultures around it as it spreads around the world. And those cultures have to decide, are we going to take this on, this new innovation? Are we going to make this part of our culture? Or are we going to try to keep it out? And so acculturation is when a culture decides, yeah, we're going to bring that in. But of course, that's going to change their own culture. They're going to get elements of the culture originated from, where the hearth is. It's going to have elements of that and therefore affect the culture that it comes into. And so that's how all of that works together. All right, then language. So language, whoops. Not there yet. All right, so language is the most important part of a culture. We talked about this a little bit the first week. But language basically, obviously, allows people to communicate and feel part of a community. And you really notice this when you travel. Whenever you travel to other countries that aren't English-speaking countries, whenever you hear somebody speak English, it's like you found like a long lost like brother or sister, someone really close to you. You're like, oh my gosh, like I can talk to you. And you you hold on to that and you'll talk, and because you feel like you have some kind of community in a place where you can't really fit in. So language, of course, you have written language as well. Some languages don't have written languages, and then you have some languages where the written language is totally separate from the spoken. So like Chinese, for example, Mandarin. You can learn how to speak Chinese and not know how to read it, or you can learn how to read it and not know how to speak it because they use symbols and stuff like that. And so it's totally different than the way ours works with a phonetic alphabet. And then of course you have different dialects. So you could be speaking the same language, English, but if you live in England or if you live in Australia, India, or just different parts of the U.S., you're going to have different words that you use. And so therefore, sometimes you can have a hard time understanding each other, even though technically you're speaking the same language. And so, like in England, for example, if you ask for a cookie, you're going to get a biscuit or like a scone. But this is even bigger than some other languages, like Italian spoken in Rome compared to Italian spoken in Venice. Now, to us, not knowing Italian, it would sound the same. But if you actually know Italian, people in Rome a lot of times don't understand the people in Venice, and vice versa, because that country was not unified for most of their history. And so the versions of Italian are actually different enough to where they don't even understand each other. And then, of course, you have body language. Some things with body language go across all cultures, like smiling. Like, smiling is always a good thing. Like, people know what that means and stuff like that. But there are certain gestures and things that, can mean different things in different cultures. Like this, for example, means okay in our culture, or like good job. In other cultures, you're calling someone something really bad. So don't do that in certain countries. Um, but let's go ahead and move on. So body language, all this was showing is just, different styles of body language and what they mean and stuff like that, and how we interpret that as people. Let's go on to religion. So religion's the backbone, moral backbone of a culture. And in some cultures, it's kind of a bigger effect than others. And so like in Western culture, since we have so much freedom and we have so many different groups living together, you're going to see different elements of different religions kind of playing a part. But in certain cultures, like in the Middle East and the Muslim world, Islam it is the foundation to their culture. Everything they do is going to revolve around Islam and the expectations of Islam. And so that has a huge effect on the way they live. So the main religions we'll end up talking about are Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Judaism, but we'll get more into that later when we get into religion. All right, so the different elements of culture. So again, just trying to give you an idea that it really just covers everything from the arts and music and dance, which that's what a lot of times people think when they think about culture, but that also includes our economic system, the things we do for a living, how we view education, our history, the holidays that we have, our belief systems, rules of conduct, and just how we interact with each other, and even how we live, like houses that we live in, or do we live in apartments, and how big are they, and stuff like that. All of that is a reflection of culture. So like, for example, real quick on this, like housing. Average house in the U.S. is 2,400 square feet. In Europe, the average living space is 900 square feet. And that's a difference that's going to affect the way you live. Like Europeans live much more outside and in a community and, and out from where they live. They don't spend a lot of time in the house, whereas we're more secluded. We like to stay inside our homes and we don't do as much outside as some other cultures. All right, other features of culture, again, just pretty much everything. Facial expressions. I mean, think about like some stereotypes of like Russians, for example. Russians always look like, just looks like they're just sad all the time. They're just not as an expressive culture as the Americans are. Of course, religious beliefs, importance of time. In Western culture, time is super important. Some countries more than others, like Germany and the United States, very much, punctual societies. And you go to other cultures where time isn't important. What's more important is relationships and stuff like that. And so in some cultures, showing up on time to someone's house is actually rude. You should show up, 15, 30 minutes later so that your host has time to prepare. And so, it's just cultures see it different ways. Obviously, paintings, art, child raising beliefs, gestures, which I just kind of hit already. Food and eating habits, like some cultures eat a really small breakfast, a very large lunch around 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and then a light dinner around 10 o'clock at night. So eating habits can be totally different. And of course, in what they eat. Concept of self, the importance of beauty, and what is considered beautiful and things is going to differ by culture. Obviously, styles of dress. Your worldview, concept of personal space. For Americans, we have a big bubble, personal bubble, don't get in my bubble. But in China, for example, you have a lot of people living in an area, and so the idea of personal space isn't like ours. They're used to being right next to each other. And then, of course, rules of social etiquette, like don't burp in public. That kind of stuff, again, is all part of culture. All right, so that's about it. The rest of this is just weird foods that people eat in different countries. You don't have to take note of this or anything like that. But one thing that is good is kangaroo. I've had that. But that's about it. So that's the general idea of what culture is. Definitely make sure you know those key terms for sure. Going forward, we'll be using those quite a bit. All right, I'll talk.